County residents are required by law to clear sidewalks in front of and alongside their properties within 24 hours of the end of a snowstorm. Working together, Montgomery County can stay safe and warm this winter. Good neighbors clear their sidewalks of ice and snow. For more information, call 311 or go to montgomerycountymd.gov/safe sidewalks.
This message brought to you by FEMA. Home fires occur most often in winter. Keep anything that can catch fire at least 3 feet from heating equipment. And never use an oven to heat your home. Stay in the kitchen when frying, grilling, or broiling food. Turn space heaters off when you leave the room or go to bed. Make sure all vents are clear of snow and ice to allow carbon monoxide to vent outside. Have your furnace, heating system, and chimneys serviced each year by a qualified professional. Learn more at www.usfa.fema.gov.
Welcome back to County Report this week. I'm Lorna Vergelli. The snowstorm kept students out of the classroom for a week. Georgian Forest Elementary School used the snowstorm as an opportunity to bring the community together. They held a special Snow Fun for Everyone event.
Come on, you guys!
We're here today to interact with our community right where they live, here at Pepper Tree Farm Apartments.
Right here, yeah. Good idea.
Oh, look. Today we decided to come out, have snowball fights, have a snowman building contest.
Nice. I think we have a winner.
We have hot chocolate for our students and a book exchange.
I think they are special in that sense because they care. They care about the children.
Because these kind of events, what they do is really strengthen the bond between our school and the families.
The majority of our students live here in this community. We wanted to come out, to join them, interact with them without academics, and just get to know our kids a little bit better.
I think it's a really cool idea, and I would love to do this again.
3!
A growing number of seniors across Montgomery County are joining senior villages to get the help they need in times of inclement weather or with daily tasks. The first blizzard of 2016 presented challenges, but these seniors are relying on each other to weather the storm.
We currently have 85 volunteers, 117 members that form a really nice, close-knit community to essentially help each other.
Neighbors helping neighbors and growing connections. That's the goal of senior villages across Montgomery County. Each village is a network of volunteers and members that help seniors live on their own.
Is the bottom deliberately dark to make it harder to see at night?
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
For example, the Silver Spring Village has a program called Storm Buddies that helps members prepare for emergency situations.
I didn't worry as much once we had everything set up.
We had, plans in place to make sure that I would know if there was anything that George needed.
There are 17 senior villages in the county that offer many programs and assistance such as tech support, shopping for groceries, or help with getting around town. I'm here in Silver Spring where these seniors are discussing and discovering what it means to be a part of a village while aging in place. The first blizzard of 2016 was a hot topic for the East County Village seniors.
One of the worries, especially for us as seniors, is that if our electric goes, we have no heat. And Prince George's County announced that they had heating centers for seniors, and they were able to pick them up in vans. In the future, maybe it would be useful if something like that exists in Montgomery County.
Problems with the county's non-emergency 311 number was also a major issue.
This isn't the first big snow we've had. Maybe the last one was several years ago, and we might have another one this year. They need to get prepared.
Although there were some remaining concerns, village members can rely on each other for any help they may need.
Like many people in the village, I wanted to help people, but I also wanted to make sure that this resource was there when I needed it.
For County Report this week, I'm Willie James Inman.
If you'd like to join or organize a senior village in your area, call 240-777-1231. Thousands of people follow him on Twitter and Facebook, including Montgomery County residents, students, and MCPS officials. Meet the Moco Snow Guy.
My name is Alex Saronis. I work at the alternative program for Montgomery County Public Schools. I'm a health and PE teacher there, and I'm the Moco Snow Guy.
He runs the Moco Snow blog, and his Twitter account has more than 10,000 followers. Kids can't seem to get enough of him, especially during the winter.
About 5 years ago in my classroom, I would share my predictions with my students, and they told me to put it on the web so that other students from other schools can see it, and we did that, and slowly it grew, and here we are today. I loved weather as a kid. I used to watch the news. I used to stay up and wait for Montgomery County to scroll by the bottom of the news every time there'd be a snowstorm, and I remember loving doing that. I just wanted there to be a place where people can go talk about what they thought would happen, so I made that place.
He's even created a system using pencils for predictions.
5 pencils, almost a virtual guarantee that there will be no school. I wouldn't be able to, I can't ever say 100% guarantee because everyone should be prepared for school no matter what. But 4 pencils would be most likely there's going to be a day off, at least a delay. 3 pencils would be 50-50 with a day off and a delay is likely. 2 pencils would be 50-50 for a delay, and then 1 pencil is we're probably not going to have a delay, but it is possible.
And the website's popularity continues to grow. It's even attracting local meteorologists.
We got over 1 million hits last winter alone. We're over 500,000 for this winter.
And what about Facebook?
Facebook, we're at about 7,500 right now. We get information from radio stations, TV stations. We have WUSA 9's Howard Bernstein has been on, and he's provided information and answered questions. We've had Devin Lucy from Channel 7 do guest predictions and stuff like that.
And just how accurate are his predictions?
We're very accurate with our school predictions. But in the past, it's been around 95% accuracy.
You can find out more about MoCo Snow on its website. In Rockville, I'm Maureen Chaudhary for County Report This Week.
Coming up next on County Report This Week, Interfaith Works has a new location. Don't go away. County Report This Week is coming right back.
Looking for a way to get around downtown Silver Spring? Hop on the Route 28 Van Go Free Circulator. The Route 28 Van Go Free Circulator provides rides Monday through Thursday from 7 a.m. to midnight and Friday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. Fast, convenient, and free. There's no better way to get around downtown. To find out more information about the Route 28 Van Go Free Circulator, including route information, visit us online or dial 311.
It's on us to stop sexual assaults.
Be more than a bystander. It's on us to hold our friends accountable.
Realize that we have a role to play in stopping sexual assault.
It's on us to get in the way before someone gets hurt.
It's on us to take responsibility, and it's on us not to look the other way.
Keep an eye on someone in a vulnerable situation.
Stop a sexual assault any way we can.
Any way we can.
If you see something happening, report it.
It's on us to take responsibility.
Be more than a bystander.
It's on us.
It's on us.
It's on all of us.
Welcome back to County Report This Week. I'm Lorna Virgili. We would like to remind county residents that Montgomery County government will observe President's Day on Monday, February 15th. County offices will be closed. Recycling and trash collection will not be scheduled on that day. The Interfaith Clothing Center in Rockville is moving to a bigger space at 751 Twin Brook Parkway in Rockville, thanks to the help of Rebuilding Together Montgomery County. Take a look.
So today we are at the Interfaith Works Clothing Center, which is an amazing place. Interfaith Works is a nonprofit in the county, and they serve low-income residents as well. At this particular facility downstairs, they have a very large clothing center, and we are building an entirely new clothing center upstairs for their clients to use. They typically serve about 13,000 clients in this space a year.
The new space is going to enable us to provide incentives to people who are getting here for the free clothing to do things like engage in ESL classes to learn English, to engage in college courses with Montgomery College, or to even learn vocational skills so that they can go out and get a better job or a new job for themselves to better take care of themselves and their family.
The White Flint 2 sector plan has been in full swing since last year, with hosting community meetings, extensive outreach, and more. The Montgomery County Planning Department team leading the plan recently held a public meeting to ask property owners to weigh in on the future of Y Flint 2. Check out this recap from Montgomery Planning.
The Y Flint 2 area. Tonight's meeting was really for the public to hear from property owners and other landowners of what they're thinking of, and then also to hear from the other civic associations and homeowners associations in terms of their concerns.
Well, I think what I heard tonight were some real concerns about how can we allow more development when there's such a shortage of school capacity. But I also was excited to hear that there are some plans for some new residential development in areas that would really benefit from seeing some new homes.
Two things came out of the meeting tonight. One is that we continue to hear a major concern about schools and the impact on schools from new development. There's an existing capacity problem in the school system already, particularly in the WJ cluster. And the other thing that came out of the meeting tonight is that it's very clear that the various landowners, the development community don't have any near-term plans to develop their properties. They've got some ideas for long-term development, but there's nothing imminent here as far as we can tell so far.
Well, as representatives of owners of several large shopping centers, we're looking for zoning flexibility. We're looking for the ability to take advantage of some new trends that we see in this area. Obviously, the proximity to Metro and the ability to diversify some of the centers that have historically just focused on auto-oriented retail. We're looking to introduce some new things into those areas. So we're looking for the ability to be flexible and grow with the market in this area.
I want it to be walkable, transit-oriented, really creating a sense of place. And this becomes basically the town center of Montgomery County.
There's a great deal of community interest, which is really good in that it helps us do our job better, helps us fully understand what all the different issues are. And we're going to continue working with the community. But at this point, all I can say is so far, so good.
Now it's time to go to Leanne Gross from the Montgomery County Animal Services and Adoption Center with some different ways you can help out by volunteering. Leanne?
Hi, my name is Leanne Gross. I'm the Volunteer Services Coordinator here at the Montgomery County Animal Services and Adoption Center. We are excited to announce that we are launching our brand new youth program initiative, where you and your child can come and volunteer here. Children between the ages of 14 and 20 can come and apply here at the shelter. This will give them the opportunity to work with animals and discover a little bit about how animal sheltering works. They can also do things such as read to the animals while they're here at the shelter. This gives them the opportunity to work on their reading skills. It also provides enrichment and calming for the animals while they're here at our shelter. Please come visit us at the Montgomery County Animal Services and Adoption Center. Our phone number is 240-773-5900.
With that, we close this edition of County Report this week. Remember to like us on Facebook and to join us again at this time every week for a look at what's going on inside Montgomery County. We leave you with images from a group that's part of Lifelong Tacoma's Snow Angels program as they participate in the Big Dig Out following the blizzard. For more information on how to sign up, visit tacomaparkmd.gov/lifelong. I'm Lorna Virgili, and thank you for watching.
you, everyone. Looking at additional agenda items moving forward, we have our conversation this evening with the noise ordinance and the landlord-tenant fees, and a work session on multifamily and business recycling program. Next week, on Wednesday, February 17th, we will have the police department's annual report. We will be discussing snow event after action review, have an update from the emergency preparedness manager and the emergency preparedness committee. We will also have a presentation and discussion of the streetscape manual and a discussion of council priorities for FY 2017. As a reminder, the City Council had 2 additional meetings in the month of January at which we talked about priorities. All the materials for the February 17th meeting are already up on the website. There are a great deal of materials to go through, so I suggest people get a head start on them. The following week, on Wednesday, February 24th, we will have the second reading ordinance amending the noise ordinance and the second reading ordinance amending the City Code chapter on landlord-tenant fees. Depending on our conversation on February 17th, we are also tentatively scheduled to have a resolution affirming council priorities. We will also have a resolution for appointments to committees and work sessions on an ordinance banning plastic bags. Tentatively scheduled is a work session on minor amendments to the stormwater ordinance and a briefing on the cable franchise agreement. And then on March 2nd, we have tentatively scheduled a work session on Tacoma Junction development, as well as a first reading ordinance establishing a vacant and abandoned property registry. I urge my colleagues to please get any comments in as soon as possible on the vacant and abandoned property registry. We started that conversation last week, and we'd like to keep the first reading on March 2nd. We also have tentatively scheduled a review of the community grants program and an update on streetlight purchase research from the head of Public Works. Looking forward, we are coming upon our budget meetings, and so I would just like to remind my colleagues to please mark their calendars for extra City Council meetings on April 11th, 18th, and 25th. Those are scheduled to be budget work sessions. So those weeks we will have 2 council meetings. All right, so I think that's it for upcoming agenda items. Now I'd like to take any public comments on voting items. First, are there any public comments regarding the first reading of the ordinance amending the noise ordinance? Anyone who would like to speak to that? No? All right, then moving on, our second voting item this evening is the first reading ordinance amending the Tacoma Park Code regarding landlord-tenant relations fees. Any public comments on that? No. We also have a consent agenda this evening. Any comments on the consent agenda regarding ordinance for replacement police vehicles? No? All right. And anyone have any public comments this evening? Please come to the podium or request the microphone. State your name and where you live.
Hello. My name's Pat Lovelace, your official peace delegate. First thing I want to mention is last week we talked about medical marijuana in the dispensaries. I don't see why it can't be dispensed in any drugstore like any other drug, because they have much more dangerous things in the drugstore than marijuana. They have, for example, morphine. They have the anti-seizure medication. They have Dilaudid, and they have fentanyl. And they have other medications that, if abused, can kill you outright. And I don't see why medical marijuana can be put in the drugstore, because there's been no known overdose cases of medical marijuana or any other use of marijuana where it kills somebody. Cannabis sativa is not dangerous. Tetrahydrocannabinol, the main ingredient in marijuana, is no known overdoses leading to death. And I'd like to also bring out the attention that, the drugstores could handle medical marijuana, and any other doctor should be able to prescribe it. And you shouldn't have to go to a special doctor because you're in pain. Your pain is no special than anybody else's. And if they have a safer painkiller than morphine, I'd love it. But I'd like to know, why do we need special dispensaries? Why does it have to be located any other distance to schools or anything else than any other drugstore? There's no reason for that. There's no logical reason for that, because it's a drug like any other drug. I'd like to see us have the availability for it if we need it, instead of going to a special dispensary and that be singled out because it's marijuana. And everybody's going to be looking at you because it's marijuana. And I don't like that. I think we should treat it like any other medication. They don't segregate Dilaudid. They don't segregate fentanyl or any other of those drugs. And those are the more dangerous ones, and an addict would prefer to play with that much more than he would prefer to play with marijuana. They're having horrible heroin overdoses. But tell me about a marijuana overdose. I'd like to know if there is one. Especially epidemic cases of it. There is none. Virginia's having a terrible problem with the heroin right now. And I'd also like to ask this city council, why haven't we got the a thing on the ordinance banning drones? And also the thing I brought up about car chargers, solar-powered car chargers for our automobiles to help us get away from fossil fuels. I want to see those two things on the agenda. And if you can do that, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Lovelace.
Yep.
Actually, we do have an update on the that the sustainability manager, Gina Mathias, is looking into the charging stations, and we should have some more information on that very soon to you. Are there any other public comments this evening?
Thank you very much.
Thank
love
you.
it, love it, love it.
Any other public comments? All right, then moving on to...
Just giving everybody else a chance there. I like going last. And I just came up to comment on two things. Number one, I want to comment on Tim Mayle and Rizzi Cressey's valiant and brave challenge to the kind of steamroller that is upon us with this library redo, and the fact that it really hasn't been determined by the public. It's been determined by the director, whom my mother hired many years ago, and my name is Ian Barclay, and I do live on Cedar Avenue. And the fellow who's designing it, Mr. Lukemire, and I'm not at all happy with the removal of parking spaces in an already tight parking lot and the changing of the entranceway to the side. And I also don't think there's been a structural engineer take a good look at what we got now. I've never been told of anything in any of these meetings I've attended about any kind of report. And as I pointed out the last time, I have serious doubts about the roof. The other thing I want to commend both Mr. Mayle and Mr. Rizzi for is the challenge to the, seems like, runaway legal fees. That whole business of already $33,000 spent on this lot that John Ursiolo, when Mr. Qureshi wasn't on the council and neither was Mr. Kovar, has told you guys not to sell, that it's critical to the business interest up there at the junction. And with the upcoming destruction of the Carroll Avenue Bridge, I think that as a staging place and a potential site for a temporary library, it's going to become even more interesting. But, I mean, I'm just astonished at the amount of money that's been spent on legal fees for this vacant lot and the sale thereof. I mean, back in the 1500s, the king issued the statute of frauds about all real estate over a certain amount of money, and any sale of real estate requires an offer and an acceptance, basically. So how it is that we've gotten into a contraction or a contractual obligation that is requiring, even if you pencil $33,000 at $300 an hour, which I hope that our legal counsel isn't receiving quite that much, you're looking at 100 and some hours on something that should be pretty open and shut. I don't know what all is being negotiated, but it just seems like that's a phenomenal amount of money. And I commend them for wanting to know what that $50,000 supplemental was, how much was going to the lot and how much was going to the McLaughlin/Poplar Avenue school property. Thank you very much and have a nice evening.
Any other public comments this evening? I'll turn to City Council comments. Councilmember Mail.
A couple of comments. The first is that our new council gets dressed up all the time. And it's a big shift from back when sometimes we had council members up here in Hawaiian shirts. So I'm going to do my best to dress down in some of our future meetings. Not way down, just down enough. Because I think sometimes it makes it seem like an even more formal and imposing body for the public. So I issue that challenge to all of you to think about former Mayor Williams's Hawaiian shirts and Councilmember Grimes as well, and whether we can't
Maybe when it gets warmer.
We could wait. We could wait till it was warmer. That's true. I wanted to follow up with the city manager and just ask. My understanding is that for a house that had code violations, a house under construction on Colby Avenue, that the violations have been remedied. But if either the city staff who evaluate those issues and or the county could just make sure to pay a second visit, I'd appreciate that. I, with no expertise in doing so, paid a visit and didn't notice any significant change, but it may be that I'm just not aware of it. Okay. And then there was an accident at the junction I told my colleagues about last night or the night before, and I was just curious what the nature of that accident was. It looked like maybe a car had been trying to pass a bus, so I'm not exactly sure. There was a bus and a vehicle and maybe other vehicles in that accident, and I'm just curious what had happened there. Thank you.
Councilmember Krovar.
Thanks. I was actually feeling bad. I didn't have a tie, so thank you for that.
No, thank you.
Okay. I'm not sure I'm going to Hawaiian shirts. A couple of things we did have on Saturday, the really interesting forum here on affordable housing, which I thought was great. I hope that's a type of event that we can do going forward on other topics, and I certainly look forward to working on affordable housing. I don't want to talk about that right now, but just want to say that was a good event. I have mentioned several times the Montgomery College question with the master plan, the facilities master plan, and that's continuing to move forward for us. I believe we're going to do a letter to the state as our next step. But I just wanted to mention one other thing. When the provost, Mr. Stewart, appeared before us on the 20th of January, one of the questions that came up was what is the status of the daycare center that the college runs, which is, as people may know, on the corner of Tacoma and Philadelphia Avenues. And we had heard that it might be closing. Was there a specific date? And his indication was that no decisions had been made and that people shouldn't have been talking about it if they were. I was subsequently given a memo that was sent out to the college community on November 16th of last year, which a parent sent to me of two kids at the daycare saying, yeah, we're closing it in June. So I don't think that there's a particular reason why that wouldn't have been made publicly shared with us, since it was shared with parents in the community. And I think it might just be sort of symptomatic of the approach that they're taking with us. I hope that's not true, but we wanted more consultation on the master plan, and even on a small detail like this, it doesn't seem like that's happened. So I just mentioned that to my colleagues and the public as we go forward on this.
Thank you. Any other council comments? All right, I have a couple of updates. It was a busy week. Last Thursday and Friday, I was in Annapolis at the Maryland Mayors Conference. I had the opportunity to meet with State Senator Nancy King, who just introduced legislation to provide long-term stable transportation revenue stream for cities and counties, as we've talked about the highway user fees. So that was a good opportunity to meet with Nancy King and reaffirm our support for moving forward on highway user fees. The other thing is, as Councilmember Kovar mentioned, we did have our community conversation on affordable housing on Saturday, and I just want to say again, thank you so much to the city staff. A lot of work went into planning and also staffing the day, and it was, I think, a terrific day. For those who were unable to attend, please check out the website. The presentations are up there, and so is the, I think, soon will be the video from the day if it's not up there yet. And there's a place where you can put in comments or questions as we continue this conversation. And then today, this afternoon, I was at the board meeting for the Council of Governments. One of the things that we talked about was the region's response to recent snow events. And so I have some interesting things that I can bring up next week. And then the other topic of conversation was affordable housing today. So it seems to be a theme. And actually, the nice thing was is that Tacoma Park got a shout out. We were talking about an enterprise community impact note that is a way to help provide loans to people who are doing affordable housing work. And in the brochure was the Parkview Towers and Montgomery Housing Partnership. So they'll be continuing that conversation on the COG board, and I will bring back more information that is useful to us. I think that's all I have. Does the city manager have comments?
Yes, I have several. One, I wanted to follow up on the Tacoma Junction legal fees, and I've given some information in my written report that will be attached to the agenda. I did want to indicate that the contract with Bregman, Berbert, Schwartz, and Gilday was for up to $30,000, with the understanding that it might need to be adjusted by the council as we got into the project. When early billing exceeded $18,000, the council was alerted by staff. Communications have been taking place between staff and the lead attorney regarding charges. The amount that has been billed so far is $35,372. Per the city code, and this is a point I just wanted to share with people, per the city code, the city manager has the authority to exceed a contracted amount by 25%. If it looks like an amount will exceed the contracted amount, it is our practice, and I do, have the city manager alert the city council. If funds are greater than the 25% are required, action to authorize amendment of the contract should be taken by council, and that the council's been advised that if we continue to work with the firm, an ordinance to authorize a contract amendment will be needed. I wanted to also tell a little bit about our newsletter, which I'm not sure if it's actually arrived in people's mailboxes yet, but we had quite a glitch. There was apparently a transmission problem between the firm that lays out the newsletter and the printer. When we didn't find any hard copies around, we investigated and found that there was some glitch in that transmission. Once alerted, the problem was resolved and the newsletters were printed and mailed. It's a little unfortunate that it was a little late because it advertised the affordable housing community conversation. And let's see, do I have my copy? Is it underneath on the bottom? It might be underneath. Yes, there we go. There's a couple other things in the newsletter that I wanted to bring to people's attention. One is some information about the library renovation. This was before the council's discussion, but it is in there. We also have an insert on Be a Good Neighbor about snow shoveling. We also have information on our Tacoma Park mobile app and on other ways to keep in touch with Tacoma Park information. So those are important things to look for, and I just wanted to highlight that. There's been several inquiries about the status of the Carroll Avenue Bridge replacement, or not replacement, renovation. The latest that we've heard is that late summer, early fall is when the bridge would close. We have always keeping track of that, and we'll see what happens. There, of course, yeah.
Please ask a follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like they're building a pedestrian bridge down at the stream level.
That's not. That's for equipment.
Got it.
The pedestrian bridge will be up at
high.
the higher level.
Thank you.
And in fact, yeah, there was some confusion about that.
Thanks,
But they do have to get the pedestrian bridge built before they close the actual road bridge, so that's to take place. Also, our Public Works Director will be communicating again with representatives of the Safe Roadways Committee to go back over the list of kind of traffic mitigation measures that we have control of and make sure that their questions are answered on that. I just wanted to let you know that. Let's see. President's Day holiday is coming up. We're closed Sunday and Monday. And that's it.
Great. I just have one question to follow up on the library discussion.
Yes.
I know we said about 2 months and requested additional information from the firm, the architect.
Right.
Do we have any estimate on when we may be getting that more?
I think it's going to be within about a week to get some materials that include a chart about the various different kinds of options that have been suggested or investigated, the kind of different cost implications of those, with some additions. That's almost ready, and so that'll be posted very soon. Similarly, they are working on a video kind of walkthrough of what it would be like inside the building, and that's going to take a couple weeks, but it will be. They're working on it right now.
Thank you very much. Any legislative updates?
I handed out a sheet with some interesting things on it. I wanted to point out a few major things that staff is monitoring. The SB 707 on freestanding medical facilities has been introduced, and Susie will be following that closely.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that I've been having discussions both with our lobbyist, who's been having discussions with Maryland Hospital Association representatives, as well as others in Annapolis. Our consultant on hospital finances is reviewing the legislation to determine if there's something specific that we need to ask for on this. This is going to be very malleable, changed text. So it's going to, what's written on the page right now is not how it will end up. We're trying to make sure that it protects elements that we are interested in so that it's appropriate for the Washington Adventist Hospital site. One of the things that is an area of some concern is simply that there was some federal action in November that put some controls on how hospitals, these kind of freestanding facilities, can charge. And so that's something that we're making sure that those provisions are grandfathered in for these kinds of situations where a hospital moves but leaves the emergency department. So we'll keep you posted.
All right, so there's been another stormwater remediation fee introduced, SB 719, and I'm sure the Deputy City Manager will be watching that closely to see how that will help us. I wanted to note on the universal voter registration that on that theme, there's a third bill that has just has come out, and it's sponsored by many delegates. The Freedom to Vote Act, HB 1007. So I thought you might want to take a look at that. There's an interesting bill that I would imagine the council might want to testify on. It's HB 808, Public Service Commission, damaged or dangling utility lines fine. So that seems like something that the city would be most interested in. I think that's all I have to talk about, but the other things are on the sheet, and I'm open to questions, or Susie.
Actually, I do want to mention SB 766. This has to do with the misallocation of funds between counties and municipalities of income tax. And so basically, this allows if a county or a municipality did not receive funds that it was due, that those are paid right away, that if, in fact, a county or a municipality has to pay back money, that there's a phased-in payment plan for that.
One question or comment on the two voting rights bills requiring automatic registration or moving toward automatic registration. I just note that one of the most important social service agencies to try to get included in that, and I don't know if it is in those bills, is the corrections facilities. So when people are being released from prison and they're getting released and presumably filling out paperwork, our understanding is from the county task force that there's a paperwork process there, that become one of the best ways to get automatic registration to happen for a population that has low voter registration rates.
Any other questions? Then we'll move on to our first voting item. This is the first reading ordinance amending the Tacoma Park Code regarding the noise ordinance.
And I can take the lead, and we're pleased that Linda Perlman of the City Attorney's Office is here to assist us. We did have the work session discussion on December 7th, where there was quite a lot of unanimity, I thought, about how to move forward with the noise ordinance. There were a few changes that have been included in the first reading ordinance in front of you. One is that the provisions of the Montgomery County Code for noise disturbance standards related to construction is now written into the document as opposed to just referenced. The authority of the Noise Control Board to impose fines has been deleted, as was discussed with the council. And a provision has been added for appeal of the Noise Control Board decision, which is something that is normal, but at least it's identified in the document. In looking through the actual ordinance, I just wanted to highlight a couple items. On page 3, lines 75 to 78, the definition of leaf blower now includes devices or machines that accept vacuum attachments. And I noticed a typo in that, so includes will be correctly spelled. In line 86, under noise disturbance, the provision unusual for the time of day or location where it is produced or heard has been removed per the discussion with council. On page 5, sections 143 to 145, there was some discussion. There were questions from Councilmember Kovar about the construction noise levels, and I just wanted to check on this. It's the Montgomery County provisions. It looks like this was taken directly from that. Mentions that the construction noise levels must be measured at the location at least 50 feet from the source on a receiving property, which is different than the other provisions where it would be at the property line. Is that correct?
Yes. I believe, is this on?
It's on. You're on.
Okay. That you would measure it 50 feet from the construction noise source, not necessarily on the property line, but on the receiving property.
Could I just ask a question about that? So, on my street, all the properties are 50 feet wide. So you could have construction activities, say, right near the property line, and the person right next door, it wouldn't be measured there. It would be measured at the next house over. Is that right?
No, let's say they're constructing on the street, and they'd measure from the noise source 50 feet towards your property, which might hit your house.
But if it's right at the property line, I mean, if it's the construction noise
from a private
from the next door neighbor,
right?
Oh, okay.
Is that?
Yeah. So I feel like if it was right on the property line, I don't know if that would exactly happen, but the houses are pretty close to each other. It would sort of, if it was next door to me, it would sort of skip over me, and only the neighbor just beyond. That doesn't quite seem like what we would have meant.
So I guess the question for this is, do we just want to accept the Montgomery County measuring amount, or do we have a different reason that we would, or would it be something that would be advantageous for us to change? And I don't have a preference either way.
I would point out that construction noise is also subject to the noise disturbance provision. So even if you didn't take the sound reading, and it disturbed you enough to file a complaint, you and a second party could file a noise disturbance complaint, aside from the decibel level.
Okay. So, but could that apply
That would be in B of
could
that
that
section.
apply to the next door neighbors then, who are less than 50 feet from the side of the
Sure.
thing?
Usually you would need two people to file the noise disturbance complaint too, so you and your next door neighbor could file a noise disturbance complaint aside from any decibel level of the construction noise.
So maybe would it make sense to just put there, some sort of just clarification of that?
I think it is there in B, construction noise disturbance. The prohibition on noise disturbance in section 14.12.050B applies to construction activities notwithstanding
Yeah, so
subsection
that's
A.
clear. That's the next section down. The numbers 156 to 158.
Yeah, I don't think I have the right numbers, but yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. The next section, Councilmember Kovar, you had a question about on line 203 under animals about dog, bird, or other animal that could habitually make a loud noise. And your question, I think, was, if it's every night at midnight, does
Right.
that? I mean, to me, that would count. That sounds like a habit, but I don't know if there's something is there a more specific definition of?
I think it's more a judgment call. I don't think it was meant to be those sort of short disturbances, but rather a dog that was continually, or some sort of animal that was continually making noise for a long period of time. It can probably be changed, but that might be more of a policy decision whether that's what the council wants to do or not.
Well,
and
I do
again, you've still got the noise disturbance option.
Okay. That's helpful. I know that there's at least one case that I've heard of where at the same time in the middle of the night that something happens. So just wanted to.
Well, I mean, I assume since it says persistently, continuously, or habitually,
Right.
that habitually is different from persistently or continuously, right? Which to me would mean that it could be a shorter one, right?
Yeah, if you
Okay.
can convince an enforcement officer.
Okay.
If not, you need to file your noise disturbance
Okay.
complaint.
Excuse, before we go on, I think in the section above about leaf blowers, there was a question about crews and multiple leaf blowers.
Right.
Yes. And I don't know if I have an answer to that, although I assume, would that be also a noise disturbance issue?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
So the noise
correct.
disturbance issue could work on that as well.
So even if a given, or each of the leaf blowers used by a crew were within the manufacturer's specs, which were okay under this, if the cumulative impact of them together exceeded that,
It caused a
it
noise
could
disturbance.
constitute a noise disturbance.
The noise disturbance doesn't require a decibel reading.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Just has to.
I wanted to identify under exemptions. Most of this was already in the code, but I just want to highlight for people that the noise control ordinance does not apply to emergency operations of fire engines and police agencies, air medical services, so essentially helicopters for that purpose, sound created by snow removal, street sweeping, and leaf collection activities by the city. Sometimes I will say, just on that, people either love to hear the snowplow coming or they don't. The sound created by garbage, trash, solid waste, and recycling collection activities by the city. And I know that there was a question about the timing on that. We have it provided that such activities should not begin prior to 6:30 a.m., and that is as a way to try to avoid some of the rush hour traffic. When it's a very hot day, or if there's some other special emergency case, it can be earlier. And so it can be as early as 5:30 a.m. on a very hot day for our crews. Is there a question you want to follow up
Well,
on that?
I did have an interaction with the Public Works Director on that, who indicated she didn't imagine they would ever do it before 6:30. So
I think I know one time when they did, and it was a very unusual situation. There's also a couple that I know have caused some concern in the past by some residents. Sound created between 9 a.m. and 10 p.m. by sports events and other kind of events. Yes?
I actually looked at that one.
Yes.
And what I'd like to add to E for second reading is sound not electronically amplified.
Which line are we on?
So you want so
Sound.
this would not include electronically generated sound. So okay.
Can have an acoustic
Is that
guitar.
something that the council is amenable to? Also, there's other kinds of events like city festivals and things that are exempt. We do try to have rules about how those noise levels are kept.
I don't think I understand the addition of electronic.
Under
that would
E,
be under E.
if
It
you've
would
got
be-
somebody with a loud microphone broadcasting, blasting out the scores of the soccer game, or my son had great walk-up music when he was up to bat. There might be some reasons that could cause some concern.
I guess I'm more. I think it's broader right now. It's any sound that's been permitted, right?
Yes.
And so I'm just as comfortable with non-electronic sound as electronic sound that's been permitted.
You mean?
If I'm reading that right.
Mm-hmm. So you'd rather keep it as is?
I think so, and I don't think it excludes electronic sound.
No, I would be exclude. My suggested addition would be to exclude electronic sound. Say it's not exempt.
But the
whichever
argument
way
can
the
be,
council wants to go.
one of the things that can be is that the council can express its preference so that as we permit, we have certain kinds of provisions, and it may be specific to the location, which some may be closer to residences than others.
Okay.
So I don't have a preference either way.
I don't either. I'm just if the sound is an electronic banjo versus a non-electronic banjo, I don't think I have strong opinions about the city treating them differently.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Shall we leave it just as it's written?
Leave it as is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Susan, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
The reference before to the exemption created by Air Medical Services.
Yes.
Why is that exemption in there? Just to protect phone call complaints about helicopters flying over?
That was Councilmember Siemens' request to add.
Okay, and I have a follow-up to that.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have an understanding? I mean, I personally, from my experience and where I reside, helicopter noise is the loudest noise that I hear on a daily basis at my home, at the bank today, for example. What is the source of our helicopter traffic aside from medical services? Is it more than that? Do we know?
Well, I can get back to you on that, but I do know that there certainly is the air medical
Right.
issue. There's often policing items where there's a fugitive that they're looking for. Somehow my house is underneath those often. It can be the president coming through. There are some things that it can be that's different than the medical.
Okay, I was just curious because people have asked me about that, and
Yeah.
I just don't know the answer to that.
And sometimes, it's just police agencies going from one place to another, or it's a weather or traffic person from the media. I mean, it can be a variety of
Right.
things. I know that in the past we have had some agreements with the hospital about how many helicopters can come back and forth and that kind of thing when it was a particularly active path. That's not been the case for some time.
Okay, thank you.
Fingers. One of the new provisions for this draft is that on line 280, page 8 of 14, emailing is one way that information can be transmitted to certain parties. And that's repeated in a couple different places for different kinds of notices. I think one of the more significant areas is on page 10, which has to do with the event of a noise disturbance or other violation of the noise control ordinance created by the use or rental of premises for music, entertainment, celebration, or performance event, whether or not admission is charged, by construction work or by a commercial activity. And that both the entity that is having the party or event or doing the work and the property owner or the management firm of that property is also subject to these provisions and can receive the notice to cease and to comply with the regulations. And I guess can then also, Linda, receive a municipal infraction if that's the answer for that.
Yes. I had one or two comments, if I could, on since you're on that part. I believe Councilmember Kovar had concerns about requiring signed written complaints from at least 2 reliable witnesses, which would happen after the event, presumably. I'd like to change that to just requiring that the event shutdown order could be issued based on complaints, don't have to be in writing, from at least 2 reliable witnesses. That would take care of your concern that such a order would be issued on the basis of one person's complaint. So they would have to have at least 2.
I guess the concern, number one, I didn't think it made sense to have the people talk about it afterwards, but it's not so much that it would never be right to have something get closed just on the basis of one person. If a person called and the police or the officers went there and it was incredibly noisy, it wouldn't matter to me if one person or 10 people had done it.
I don't think it does. It's just
right. But I think we just want to clarify.
Officer would hear that.
Right. We just want to clarify that the concern I heard from some constituents was that it's not just because one person complains it automatically gets shut down.
That's
right. And if we could just
it's an officer judgment.
But if we could insert something that would just clarify that.
I think there's may. I think it says may shut down.
That's right.
It doesn't say shall.
For example, in 340, in lines 344 and 345, and I had highlighted this.
I guess we can add in his or her discretion or something, but I think it's not needed.
I think something like that would be helpful, just to satisfy people that it's not just the complaint itself doesn't trigger that they have to use their judgment. If that's what's intended, anyway.
That certainly is what's intended.
So we're talking about line like 352, 353?
That was actually then 344 and 345.
Okay.
This is lines 352 through 354 is a different situation, okay. And that is the judgment of if an event or activity is shut down, the enforcement officer may order any or all persons to leave the premises. Okay. And this is something where it is very much a judgment call. I think, Councilmember Kovar, you were mentioning, well, if they live there,
I was going to add something on that one, which would have been words to be determined, but basically order any or all persons, except the property owner or a tenant occupant of the premises.
Good.
Okay.
Just back on the previous one for a second, which is, I guess I'd rather stick with may there, because otherwise I wonder if all the rest of our codes that involve an enforcement, code enforcement, police enforcement personnel need to be adjusted to match the same language.
No, it would still have may. It would just have may in the officer's discretion.
But then his point would be that throughout the code, anytime it says may, you'd have to add those extra words for it to have the same
in the first place. So I'm fine with not.
Right. And I was just saying, I think our probably standard practice is to use may when we mean the officer.
That's right.
Should have discretion. And if that's the case in the rest of our code, then I'd rather just keep it the same, because that would imply.
How about if I look that over and play around with it a little bit before we do the final thing and see if there's another? I understand what you're saying.
Or also may after a warning.
I'd really rather not do that. I'd really rather not do that. I think they need to have their judgment in however that gets handled. And they certainly have the judgment to do a warning, but they may have the judgment to say that's it. This is unacceptable.
If we can just have a separate
we can have a conversation, sure. Call me or email me. The police chief had raised the question about police's authority to shut down any party on private property due to noise. this came in late this afternoon. I need to do a little bit of research on that. I think his basis is probably incorrect because he talked about the freedom of assembly, which generally under the First Amendment secures the right of the public to meet for any purpose, picketing, protests, and so forth on public property. Doesn't really apply to private property. But we still need to look into this.
Thank you.
And perhaps whether, his question was really, can the police do anything but order the noise to stop? And once the noise stops, do they really have the authority to tell people, except for the owner, to leave? And I think they probably do after some warnings. If this is the second or third time if they've been out, for sure, I think you can shut it down. But I'll look into that a little more before either second reading or another work session, depending how this is going to proceed.
Yeah, I certainly would like to get the answer of that. Thank you.
And I just ask as well, when you look into that, what's the basis of the order to disperse at that point?
Mm-hmm.
Because the point is that it's caused a noise, and the noise has been eliminated.
Right.
Then the dispersing is no longer.
And I think that's some of his interest in clarifying it. There certainly are a number of reasons to shut something down that end up being kind of the public disturbance aspects he's mentioned, unsafe situations. I mean, there's a variety of areas where they do have that judgment and can act. I think his question was solely on the noise and what do you do with that? And so it'll be good to hear the answer on that.
If there's a fair answer.
In page 12, 14, sections, lines 402 to 411, I believe, Councilmember Kovar, you had questions about if somebody didn't show up at the noise board's hearing, would that be considered a violation? And I don't know that I have the question.
I can answer that one fairly easily. If it's the person being charged who didn't show up, which I assume it is, if the complainant doesn't show up, I presume the case will be dismissed. Right. If the person being charged didn't show up, then I think it would essentially be a default situation, and the complainant would still have to show a violation. And the Noise Control Board could still act, assuming the person had been served. Basically, ex parte proof.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And that could be in the rules for the hearing board. I don't think it needs to be in the statute. Right.
Mm-hmm. Lines 434 to 442 have to do with the board, and basically I think this related to the question. We had taken out the option for the board to simply levy a fine. Linda, do you want to talk then about would the board make perhaps a recommendation about a fine, or are they just to simply make a determination that there was a problem and then
my preference, strong preference, and I'll tell you why in a minute, is to keep it if the board decision was not complied with, then a citation would be issued. If you're issuing a citation based on Noise Control Board before there's been any type of violation of an order, you have to reprove the violation. You're charging them with the noise violation. And so what's the point of the hearing before the Noise Control Board? You still have to bring in your witness to show there's a noise violation or your sound level reading. Whereas if the Noise Control Board has already acted and then the person violated it, your citation is for violation of the Noise Control Board order rather than the initial violation.
So this would be like a recurrent activity that the person might violate, or they might not take certain steps that the board said they had to take.
Correct. They've either violated it again or they were, yes, exactly.
I think that goes through the various items.
I have a question.
Yes.
How does this apply to when a resident complains about, for example, Washington Adventist University, Washington Adventist Hospital, their HVAC systems being too loud?
How would we... A noise disturbance, right?
Yes.
No, not necessarily. Those types of things are certainly can be measured.
Right.
Well, sometimes they can, and sometimes they're only, I think, because the police have supposedly come out to measure, and it did not read, the disturbance did not read on the meter. So, but the constituent continues to say that there's a problem. And if you go behind the house, you can hear the HVAC unit on. So would they go before the noise board?
If they can find another resident to join in their complaint, then they certainly could file a noise disturbance complaint.
Okay.
And assuming you decide to reactivate the noise control board, could go before that board.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Are there any other questions or comments on this? All right, so I think the if everyone agrees with what we just walked through, the two outstanding issues I wrote them down somewhere. Here we go. Was around lines 345 and 346, the May, regarding law enforcement shutting down an event or activity, and looking at the police chief questions that he just submitted to the city attorney this afternoon. So with that, would someone like to move the amendments to the noise control ordinance?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? No? Okay, we're done with this one then. All right, moving on now to our second voting item this evening. This is a first reading ordinance amending the Tacoma Park Code regarding landlord-tenant relations fees. We had a work session on this last week. I don't know if the city manager has any other additional.
There were no changes that were requested from the reviewing the document during work session, so there's been no changes here, and recommend you ask any other questions you have and move forward.
All right. Does anyone have any questions before we move it? All right. Do you have a question?
No.
Okay, sorry. Would you like to move it?
So moved.
Anyone would like the second?
Second.
Second, all right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? All right. I'd like to thank the city attorney for coming tonight.
Is this the second reading?
No, this is the first reading. Second reading is next
good.
week. All right, and now we have a consent agenda. Would someone like to move the consent agenda?
So moved.
Councilmember Siemens, second.
Second.
Councilmember Smith, and we can just do voice, right, for this? It's all right, so, yeah.
Councilmember Kovar,
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens.
Aye.
Councilmember Mao.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Qureshi.
Yes.
Councilmember Schultz. Mayor Stewart.
Yes. All right. That takes us then to our work session, which is an update on the multifamily and business recycling program.
Okay, I thought I just saw Daryl. But I'll
she
go
didn't
ahead
think we were going to be on it. We're doing
We're
it
so
early,
good.
so.
We're so good. Let me go ahead and talk a little bit about this item, and I'm sure that she will be here in a moment. She's on her way. In July of 2015, the council adopted ordinance 2015-33, which amended existing city code provisions which required recycling at multifamily properties and established a requirement for recycling at commercial and institutional properties. The law became effective January 1. In addition to requiring the establishment of these recycling programs, the law requires the filing of the annual July 1 compliance report for multifamily properties with private collection. I will say that we've had numerous meetings internally on this. We have struggled with some versions of draft regulations. We've simplified those to regulations that are very attuned to the terms of the ordinance directly. And we've done an enormous amount of work on preparing, reviewing methods for receiving annual reports, identifying what would be involved in the signs that would be required at the multifamily properties, that we would make sure that the system was enforceable, and identify, we've talked internally about how we would enforce that. We've been doing an enormous amount of work preparing website content that describes the provisions for the multifamily properties, businesses, institutions, and commercial properties. We've compiled a listing, address listing of the multifamily properties, as well as for the businesses, so that we can send out information about the requirements. And as I said, we've been looking at the regulations that would implement this. In your package, there's only a couple key parts that are really the areas that address the new ordinance. And so if you look on page 5 under Part 3, multifamily facilities with private collection, and it determines that, it specifies that the person responsible that contracts with the licensed collector has to file an annual report that describes that they have a company that does indeed pick up the recycling, and they need to file that by July 1 every year. On page 6, and they also require that that there's a posting of notice to residents, and that this information be distributed and posted in a place where the refuse and recycling bins are located, about how to do the recycling, what goes in which bins. For business recycling, it simply is clear that commercial property owners must make adequate common recycling collection bins available to their tenants, and that the bins should be in a safe, accessible location, and that businesses are responsible for ensuring their employees recycle and must separate refuse and recyclables generated on their premise. Finally, there's just kind of a notice that is needed, and that's on the very last page here, on page 8, that there would be a notice to the tenants of a multifamily property that they must separate their trash and recycling. And what we are identifying is that there's some language that they could use to share that information, or they can use the language that's provided by their collector of the recycling bins. So, let's see, Daryl, would you like to talk a little bit more about what you've been working on? And
Sure. We've been working with Ken from the City Attorney's Office, so he's been reviewing our draft letters. They're pretty much prepared to go out for both the multifamily and the business units. We've also got the website in draft form and can share that with you once it goes through the Craig screen. Beyond that, I think the one topic that we wanted to raise this evening was currently the way the law was passed. It has a July 1st deadline for the annual reports. In meeting with the HCD staff, multifamily apartments have a December 31st deadline for doing their annual licensing. So we're trying to figure out a way to combine those two things so that when an apartment owner is doing their annual licensing, they would also complete their annual report. So one suggestion on a staff level is a consideration of changing the deadline date from July 1st to December 31st, just to coincide. Doesn't even have to be for this first year. We could do it in subsequent years. But it may be beneficial and simpler for everybody, both city staff as well as the apartment owners, to just manage things at kind of the same cycle.
They post the information online, and so this could be another box on the online form.
Yeah, we have. We're developing the ability to both allow apartment owners to do an online report, or if they want to print out and hand copy and mail in, they can do that as well. The HCD annual apartment licensing thing is a very structured report that we may or may not be able to incorporate this additional report with. It's a software issue and it's a programming issue. Regardless, we will, from the initial report deadline, have the ability to both accept an online report as well as a hard copy, depending on what the apartment owners want to do.
Do you have any plans to have demonstrations for the management company, maybe leaders of the tenant association, on how to recycle? The reason why I ask is I was in a meeting with tenant association board and the senior level executive for the management company for Essex House. During that meeting, just removing trash, the proper way to remove trash, is an issue. That people aren't doing that correctly. So, I mean, granted, we might say it's nice to send all these notices, but I don't know if we're going to get the compliance that we want if we don't sit down with people and show them how to throw away or recycle different things. Because we have, there's a mouse issue in Essex House. A lot of it is because people don't throw away their trash properly. And then people don't even want to go into where the dumpsters are contained because there's just trash all over the place. You got all these rodents running around. So, I mean, I support recycling. I think it's a great thing. But if we don't actually walk through and show the residents how to do this, I mean, hold their hand, I don't see them doing it.
And if I could piggyback on that, Daryl, before you answer, I have to echo what Jared says, because I think there's even very well-intentioned people who think they know what they're doing when they're recycling. And I've talked to your drivers, and many of them are like, well, Rizzy, no pizza boxes, no this, no that. And I think it would be really helpful, even for me, to have some kind of an education on that. I don't know if you can use City TV. I mean, I just watched.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, I mean, I've just watched an episode of Mr. Rogers with my kids the other day, and he went to a landfill and explained what happens to trash and how you recycle. And I think if you could be our Mr. Rogers on that.
Yeah, I'll pass on that one.
Yeah. But I think some education is warranted.
Yeah, I think you raise a very good point. It can go in all kinds of directions. One thing that's critical with the apartments is we really can't instruct their tenants without a partnership with their hauler. So that's one of the challenges of implementing this particular law. We can't stand in the way of the haulers. The haulers will have specific requirements, specific guidelines, and the management company and the haulers have to be speaking with each other and on the same page in order to get this to work. We can certainly help tie the two together and advocate. And we, in our website page, we will have resources for apartment owners that'll list the haulers in the area that have contracts for recycling. So we'll have that information available in the event that a management company wants to take a look at a different hauler if they're unsatisfied. And I think competition is a great way to raise the bar on what services are being provided for the tenants. So we're trying to facilitate that by providing information to them about options for hauling. In the early days of recycling, we did several meetings within buildings. Every building is unique. So it actually would require at least a staff person, if not more, to do building-by-building educational programs, because the Essex House is different. Then the Franklin is different. Then the Park Ritchie is different than the 6-unit garden-style apartment. You basically have to end up doing a building-by-building program if you really want to go that route. It's certainly something we can take a look at and make some recommendations to Susie in the budget process if we want to take that educational route. In terms of single family and other general, I think you can't ever educate enough. Absolutely, no matter how many times you say something, you'll reach different people in different ways each time. So one of the things we're trying to do is, as we refresh our web pages, is just make that information more accessible, more easy. In terms of the notices that we've developed for the apartment owners,
if I can just go back, some of the materials that are being identified for the website have pictures of different kinds of things. So you can really just put the picture to it. This goes over here, this goes over there, which I find, for the same reason, I find really helpful. I'm like, I really can't do that with X.
Yeah, that was the point I was going to make. It's going to be a photo. It's a photo notice versus a Word notice for that very reason, because of the language issues as well as the simplicity of understanding with pictures what you need to do.
And I think
I'm sorry.
that's fantastic, but some of the problems at Essex House are people won't put the trash in the chute.
Right, and if
So
I
it's just-
can actually address that one.
Okay.
That's what I was going to do.
All right, thank you.
Unfortunately, I have a lot of knowledge about how Victory Tower does this. They had to go through quite a lot to figure out how to do recycling in their building. And it's the same thing as many buildings. It has the trash chute, the little tiny room. There's not space for recycling stuff. What do you do with it? And so they ended up crafting a whole system where there's certain days when you bring recycling and there's certain bins for that on each floor. And then those are collected separately and taken to a place. And it took a while to educate. They had floor monitors on each floor about how to do the trash part and how to do the recycling part. And so I think there may be some times when there's certain models of buildings that we could say, here's how this building did it, and you might be able to get that as an example.
That might be helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, can the annual report be required to have the building show what they've done to train the people? To educate, did you at least, several times a year hand out leaflets or whatever?
Education thing?
Yeah, we may want to build that in a step-by-step approach. Year one might be just, is the notice posted, and do you have a contract in place for recycling? Because I think there are still buildings in the city that don't have a contract for a recycling collection. So that would be step one. And then we could potentially come back to you all with some recommendations about improvements to the law that could address things like, have you done a public notice campaign? Have you sent out flyers and samples of those things? So we could go that route. But again, I think to the degree that we can partner with the HCD and the landlord-tenant programs to try to not make this difficult for people, that you have to do one thing one time a year and another thing another time a year, really get owners on a schedule that's understandable and that paces itself and that's known, so they can just go through the steps and improve the situation year to year.
So what do you need from us this evening?
Well, we do have I guess we would like to request that the council consider an amendment to the ordinance that changes the date for the annual report for multifamily properties. I'd also want to make sure that, first of all, I guess I want to first apologize that we're late in getting this implemented. I will say it's not because we didn't work on it. It's been more of a struggle than we anticipated. I think we're close to being able to implement it now. But from a council perspective, we would like at least action, some direction, if either not this year or a future year, that we move to a December 31 date for reporting. And if there's anything that's specific that isn't in the ordinance that you want to see of us, we need to know that. I also do want to just, highlight that, as Ms. Braithwaite mentioned, staff is very limited. We're preparing the information on this, but actually doing inspections and that kind of thing, we do not have staff to do that at this time. And that will come through the budget discussions.
Mm-hmm. Councilmember Mann?
A couple of, first, thank you. Second, I'm happy to support the amended date. Third, I think it wasn't clear to me here, but I think, Ms. Braithwaite, you just said that electronic filing of the annual form is going to be possible, and I would encourage that in this case and wherever possible for the city. Having made such an effort on our mobile website, it would be nice to have those kind of features built into our mobile website. A question, do we, for businesses and then for affordable housing, and particularly, I guess I'm thinking about affordable housing providers who are nonprofits, may have a county connection to their financing, for example. Mm-hmm. Are either of those groups of entities within the city under county laws around requiring recycling?
It's our understanding that the way the county law is crafted, it exempts municipalities from the county ordinance related to commercial as well as multifamily recycling.
Including nonprofit providers. Okay.
Again, and we can ask Ken to confirm that, but when we first discussed it, that was the reason, because we weren't included in the county's ordinance.
Again, I'm happy to support the amended date.
Any other comments or questions? So maybe we'll just do a straw vote for it this evening, because you'll have to come back to us, correct?
Yes, we have to come back.
Right. So just a show of hands, all those in favor of amending the date? Looks like Councilmember Siemens left the room for a moment, but I think we can probably move forward with that, and then it can come back to us.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Braithwaite. All right. I think that was it for this evening. I would just like to say, since we are finishing early, to remind my colleagues that getting in comments on the vacant and abandoned properties registry, please put that at the top of your list so we can have another productive evening when we take that up. And the next time we meet, there will be a lot to go through. So.
Right. The two things. One is it was very helpful to have the comments on the noise ordinance so that we could be prepared with some answers on that. The second thing is that for next week, the streetscaping text, it's a large document. It's very interesting. I think that besides you, a lot of our residents would be interested in it, and it's worth spending some time and making sure that some of your key constituents have had a chance to see it.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. All right.
Mayor,
yes, go ahead.
Did you see the note that came out from MML's bulletin that talked about the abandoned properties, foreclosed properties?
No, go ahead.
Or you would put me on the spot.
Well, you put me on the spot.
All right, give me 1 second.
Okay.
Let's see here. So I've mentioned this before about what MML is doing regarding blighted and foreclosed properties update. And one thing I just want to say is that the legislative committee did not meet this week, so that's why I don't have an update. Mm-hmm. So the different departments on the state side, Maryland's Department of Planning, Housing and Community Development, Assessments and Taxation, Labor, Licensing, and Relations are all coming together to come up with a better way to get properties out of this limbo state, whether they're blighted or foreclosed. So we should have something by February, and if anybody has any comments or questions, you can talk to Tom Reynolds at MML.
Terrific. Thank you. All right. With that, we'll adjourn. Have a nice evening.
Love it.